Well, this is one of the greatest public policy failures of our time. And John, you have covered so many events around the world during your career, and you've been in some of the toughest places. But when you think this, that we have the vaccine, there's actually a surplus of it in the West, we're stockpiling it at the moment, and yet there is a shortage in the poorest countries, so much so that only 3% in low-income countries are vaccinated, only 7 to 8% in Africa. And I was looking at the figures today. Burundi, 0.2%, 1 in 500. Mali, Somalia, less than 1%. And yet we promised we'd have vaccinated 40% in all these countries by the end of the year. This is morally reprehensible. It's a stain on all our conscience. When you have the vaccine and you have the science and you have the brilliant technology, not to put it at the service of people whose lives you can save, is something that forever will be a stain on what we do in the West.
Well, what explains it? How can this have happened so deep into our development? How have we managed to miss this?
You know, for a time this summer, Africa was sending vaccines to Europe, and Europe was insisting that vaccines needed in Africa that had been manufactured at the Aspen factory were transferred to Europe. And that's what's so unfair. Why it's happened? Because people had retreated inwards, because politicians have felt that the only way that they could respond is a very narrow view of self-interest. And they haven't realized that the disease will spread in Africa or Asia. It will mutate, there will be variants, and they will come back to haunt us here. Nobody's safe till everybody's safe, and everybody lives in fear until no one lives in fear. And it's this short-sighted view of what the national interest is that has led us to this position. And equally at the same time, it's been a failure to coordinate, to cooperate, to bring countries together, because there are stocks in one country that could easily be transferred to another country if we had coordinated our activities better. And I've been trying, and will continue to try to make that happen. And now there's a problem of finance, because as we enter 2022, we're 23 billion short for vaccines and testing equipment, 24 billion short for in-country capacity, 10 billion short for pandemic preparedness, and there will have to be a major effort at burden sharing over the next few months if we're going to make 2022 the year when we finally take control of this vaccine. If we cannot end the virus until we end the underfunding.
But the most disturbing thing is that as technology and invention moves ahead at the most fantastic pace, after all, we have a vaccine, which was a brilliant thing in the first place, the world is almost going backwards in recognizing that the world needs the vaccine. The world, not just my country.
Well, you know, I had to deal with the global financial crisis and work on it in 2009, and people said, well, isn't the truth of this that it's the economy, stupid, everything revolves around the economy? And I said, no, the truth of 2009 is that global problems need global responses, global solutions. And I think from 2010 onwards, we went into, if you might call an age of nationalism, because we had protectionism, we had border controls, we had immigration controls, we had all this anti-immigrant rhetoric. And then when we had President Trump in power, we had America first, and then China first, India first, countries retreating into the silos. And despite the fact that President Biden is trying his best to pursue a multilateral approach, we never had the world coming together to fund the WHO. We haven't got a world trade agreement for the first time in 40 to 50 years. And of course, the IMF and the World Bank are not as effective as they should be, because there is no international leadership that is pushing them ahead. So until we get these international institutions reformed and working better, then at every point, I think you'll find, and you've reported all these events over these last 4 decades, you'll find that we will not make the progress we need until leaders recognize that they must take a more enlightened view of what national self-interest involves.
But I remember in your own speeches, particularly in the period when you were in high office, I remember this particular quote: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Do you still believe that?
Yes, and that's Martin Luther King, because I think I see, and I think you'll see from your experience, young people refusing to accept the status quo. Social movements like the Me Too movement and the climate change movements expressing their desire for quite fundamental change. The world not being prepared to accept what leaders say must be the status quo. and therefore some rebellion against it. And I do see the possibility of change if we could bring together the goodwill that exists right around the world to take the action that is necessary, the support we've seen for our communities from people as a result of what's happened to them during COVID, people wanting to work together, people hating the isolation, people wanting to feel part of a community. I think that's my hope for the future. And I hope that your years of reporting, John, have, I'm sure, taught you that when good people come together, you can actually make a huge difference and the world can change. And that's why Martin Luther King said, quote, that the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice still is, I think, where we should want to be as we begin a new year in 2022.
So despite everything, you, Gordon Brown, are still an optimist.
I think I'm probably more optimistic than I was a few years ago because I've got young teenage sons and I see their positive view of the future and how things can change. And I have seen the effect, as you must have seen the effect, of Black Lives Matter, for example. It has changed our view. And it's not sort of celebrities, it's sports where people, millions of people are interested in that. And that's where it's come through most of all. And of course, the Me Too movement has made a huge difference to the way people see things. Now, you yourself have spent a career speaking truth to power and speaking truth even when power doesn't listen to you. And I think that's the mood of so many people across the world today, that they want to see things change and that they're prepared to take the actions to do so. So I'm optimistic about the future, but also because I believe that most of the problems, because of our scientific genius, because of the technological advances, most of these problems are now seen to be soluble. And whereas, 2 years ago, nobody thought we could solve this virus, we didn't have the testing, we didn't have the vaccines, we didn't have the equipment. Now we know we can solve the problem. The difference is now that we can produce enough vaccines, 1.5 billion a month, 20 billion by next June, enough to vaccinate the world 2 or 3 times over. It's just the distribution of them that is in the wrong place.
Gordon Brown, thank you very much for talking to us.